Donald Trump pushed back Tuesday against Ukraine's objections to being excluded from talks between the US and Russia in Saudi Arabia aimed at ending the war in eastern Ukraine. According to Associated Press, he also seemed to suggest that Ukraine was to blame for a war that began only after Russia invaded that country. Speaking to reporters from his Mar-a-Lago estate, Trump said, "Today I heard, well, we weren't invited." Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. Trump didn't mention that Russia has also failed to end the war it began when it invaded its neighbor. A half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, Trump said, echoing his frequent claim that he could have prevented the Russian invasion. Trump said he thought he had a good chance to end Russia's war in Ukraine, but bristled at suggestions that the US and Russia had begun negotiations to end fighting occurring without Ukraine playing a role.
Do you have any message for Ukrainians who, after 3 years of fighting, might feel betrayed or disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching these people being killed at levels that you've rarely seen, not even close, since the Second World War. And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very little land, without the loss of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their sides. You have those magnificent golden domes that are shattered, will never be replaced. You can't replace them. 1,000-year-old domes that are so beautiful, you can't replace that. A whole civilization has changed because of what. So when they're worried about not being seated, you mean somebody that should have gone in and made a deal a long time ago. You could have made a deal. This is one that could have made a deal. There was no talk of this during the Trump administration. Putin would have never, ever done it. And by the way, we wouldn't have had October 7th, you know that. We wouldn't have had October 7th. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad for this. He was so bad, so pathetic, so sad.
How would you counter the perception, because Russia's pushing for this, obviously, they don't really hold true elections, that would be a capitulation of some sort. How would you guard against potentially Russia installing a puppet government? And then finally, how would that new election have an impact on getting Zelensky to sign the rare earth minerals deal?
Look, you have leadership, and I like him personally. He's fine. But I don't care about personally. I care about getting the job done. You have leadership now that's allowed a war to go on that should have never even happened, even without the United States. Look, we had a president who was grossly incompetent. He had no idea what he was doing. He said some very stupid things, like going in for portions and all of the things. He made a lot of bad statements, but he's grossly incompetent, and I think everyone knew that. This is something that should have never happened, would have never happened. And I used to discuss it with Putin. President Putin and I would talk about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, I will tell you that. But there was never a chance of him going in. And I told him, you better not go in. Don't go in. Don't go in. And he understood that. He understood it fully. But I'm only interested, I want to see if I can save maybe millions of lives. This could even end up in a World War III. I mean, to be honest with you, you've been hearing now Europe is saying, well, I think we're going to go in and we're going to go. All of a sudden, you're going to end up in World War III over something that should have never happened. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Before the end of the month, you guys will settle out. Probably. Do you have a date in mind? Thank you.
Top Russian and U.S. officials are holding talks in Saudi Arabia in a bid to improve their ties and negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. According to Associated Press, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met in Riyadh on Tuesday. The meeting between the two countries' top diplomats in Riyadh would be their most significant since Russia invaded its neighbor almost 3 years ago, and is meant to pave the way for a meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Earlier this month, Trump upended U.S. policy toward Ukraine and Russia, saying he and Putin had agreed to begin negotiations on ending the war.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Please.
In Voronezh, Russia, on the night of 27 to 28 January 2025, two expensive enemy R-330ZH Zittel electronic warfare systems were destroyed. This was reported by the press service of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. In Voronezh, Russia, on the night of 27 to 28 January 2025, two expensive enemy R-330ZH Zittel electronic warfare systems were destroyed. The stations were installed at the Protech plant, where they are manufactured. The Russians plan to send the R-330ZH electronic warfare systems to the combat zone of the criminal war against Ukraine, but a fire in Voronezh consumed both residents, the report says. The Defense Intelligence of Ukraine called the destruction of two Zittel systems a serious loss for the aggressor country. But intelligence does not indicate the cause of the fire at the Russian Protech plant. Voronezh in the Russian Federation is systematically attacked by drones. The R-330ZH, also named Zittel, is a jamming communication station designed and manufactured by the Russian company Protech. The system is in service with the Russian Army and deployed by the 18th Motor Rifle Brigade. The whole system includes one Ural 43203/KAMAZ 43114 truck and one shelter with 4 telescopic masts. The truck is the control center for the operators. The shelter is equipped with 4 telescopic active phased array transmitter antennas mounted on a 4-wheels trailer. The R-330ZH is designed for detection, analysis, direction finding, and jamming of satellite and cellular phone communication systems operating in the frequency from 100 to 2000 MHz. The jamming system provides analysis and selection of emitters' signal parameters.